You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Snow is falling all around us. Children playing, having fun. And yet there's an episode of Skeleton Crew that's just been released. And so it's only fair that on this festive day, Mark and myself break away from stuffing our faces with chocolate coins and hollow Santas and have a natter about what we thought about this week's episode of Skeleton Crew. This is Christmas Day, episode 5, entitled, You Have a Lot to Learn About Pirates. So, of course, if you're listening to this, having not seen the episode, step away for a minute or two, watch the episode, and then come back and join us. Otherwise, you're going to be spoiled. Last week, we left the adventurers on the war-torn planet of Actrin. SM-33 reveals that he was ordered by his old captain to have his memory wiped and destroy the coordinates from Aatin, which were stored up in the supervisor's tower. Fern, being the wily little captain that she is, remembers that in episode 1, she overrides the memory of her nanny droid and does exactly the same thing to SM-33, who then goes on a rampage, only to be saved by the hero of the week, Neil, as he steps up and chucks a rock at our marauding droid and distracts him from attacking the rest of the crew, allowing Jod to come in and save the day by powering him down. So welcome to Making Tracks Reaction Crew.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
Mr. Back.
Mr. Newbold, Merry Christmas and all the other nonsense. What did you make of this episode?
I loved it. Loved it. Best Christmas present Lucasfilm could have given me today. Absolutely loved it.
Beats a Christmas card, doesn't it?
Just a shade. Yeah. Oh, they don't do those anymore. But yeah, hey ho. It's all good. No, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. If they were going for a Star Wars remake of Goonies, then they've absolutely smacked it right in the bullseye with this one. It couldn't be more Goonies if they tried. And thank goodness they're trying, because whatever they're doing is working a treat. It had everything. It had action. It had, I think, the best visuals we've had in Skeleton Crew so far, and it ain't been slacking, so that's high praise. It looked amazing. The music was great. Every element of it worked for me. Even that great big weird squid walrus thing, which I at first thought, oh no, what's this? And then by the time he was out of it, I was like, that was really cool. I want to see him again. So everything about it was brilliant, and loads of Easter eggs.
Excellent. Well, it's a little bit early for Easter, but we'll take it. I mean, in fact, actually, I'm pretty much sure cream eggs and mini eggs in the store the other day. So it's never too early.
Easter starts tomorrow.
This episode, we end up on a spa planet of all things, which actually they make that reference about this isn't for kids, but we get like a Star Wars spa instead. However, for someone like me and you who have read a lot of Star Wars comics and stuff like that, it didn't feel too far removed from a galaxy far, far away. It kind of worked.
It did work. I thought it was fascinating. And then visually, I thought it was beautiful. There's bits of Alderaan in there. There's bits of Vandor in there from Solo with the mountains, and seeing the pleasure yachts. It was a bit like the First Light, the ship from Solo, and just different things like that were just little nods and little touches. The mud baths kind of reminded me a bit of Kessel. So there was lots of little familiar Star Warsy bits, but just the framing of it and the layout of it, it was Earth enough to be relatable, but not too Earth that you go, oh, they've just picked that computer that Wimstad's using off the high street. It was different enough that it had its own vibe. But it was. I thought all of that was absolutely on point.
Exactly. I like how this series has developed. It doesn't feel like there's too kind of awkward a jump forward. So, we start off with this episode with the guys pondering what they're going to do with SM-33 and do they turn him back on. Luckily, KB's rerouted his memory, so he should be a little bit more safe, so we can get a bit more information out of him, which is how they end up on the Spa planet. If there's ever going to be like a Galaxy of Fear type Young Jedi Quest title to this episode, it would literally just be called Skull Ridge Mountain, which is basically where they're heading. It's the hideout of the original owner of SM-33 and the Onyx Cinder. which I guess is probably the Star Wars equivalent of a Black Pearl.
Oh, complete Black Pearl vibes. And when
Yeah.
they mentioned Captain Renaud, which is Donner, Richard Donner, who's obviously a big influence for John Watson, Chris Ford, Renaud is Donner backwards. And you heard Renaud's Ghost last week. Total, complete Pirates vibe.
They're kind of heading there because that's where he keeps all his loot and his booty, and that's where his Captain Log is. And that's basically where the coordinates are for Atatin. So they've got reason to go there. They haven't just gone there just for like a facial and a massage. And it's keeping this really tight story moving in the right direction. We do jump away back to Atatin because we hadn't really caught up with them for a couple of weeks. I have to say, it does seem that in the Star Wars galaxy, you either have a really, really cool job, i.e. you don't really work for money, you're basically like a smuggler or a pirate, or you basically work in a soulless office. It doesn't seem to be like a middle ground, does there? We kind of see Wendell in a kind of a very similar vibe to what we saw in Andor with those open cubicles, kind of a soulless environment.
Completely, yeah. These jobs just add a cubicle, everyone just plowing away. It feels like a 9 to 5 thing.
Yeah.
Again, another Earth conceit that works by transposing it into Star Wars. It just gives you the feel of that daily grind. And as we move through the episode, we are learning more about Atatin and what it's about. But if you're living on Atatin and working, of course, these parents, you see Neil's mom come and give Wim's dad the little cable to try and hack in and find the barrier access code. And then you learn that Burns' mom is basically Wim's dad's boss. Yeah. So that was interesting as well. The fact that they all work together and know each other, but probably don't tell, because they're only kids, they're probably not telling their kids a huge amount of what's going on. You've got your work colleagues, and that's one bunch of people you interact with, and then you've got your friends, and that's another. Yeah. And with some folks, those two things don't bleed over into each other. And so this feels like one of those situations where the kids' parents all work and know each other pretty well, but the kids don't realise that. I kind of like that as well.
You kind of get the idea that with Fern's mum, because she's a supervisor, she is kind of removed. And actually, you kind of see that in that episode because it's Neil's mum and Wendell, they're the one who's plotting, and she's the one who's like, I'm trying to go through the official routes here.
Yeah.
And,
it's not quick enough, is it?
It's not quick enough. And I do like how the little device that she gives him is very analog. It almost, to me, looked like an RCA to SCART converter or something you plug in your TV just to get your old retro consoles working. It's that fun analog, digital, middle grey area that we step all over with Star Wars.
Hello, I'm Dennis Lawson, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
We had a really cool moment with Yod in the ship with Win. We still don't get, again, we get these kind of hints about the fact that it sounds like Yod's had this Jedi training to some description, because he starts to recite and regurgitate some of the dogma that we've heard about, like, focus, terminal reality. A
very Qui-Gon Jinn line.
Yeah, very, very living force and that.
Yeah.
But yet we still don't get any answers from that as to, is it some kind of like long con, or if this is actually like he is like force sensitive, or maybe it may have been trained. And I think you kind of almost get the feeling that he kind of mentions about like how he had to forget his parents would probably mean that maybe he was or at least went to train as a Jedi, became a Padawan, but then at some point deviated off.
He's about the right age. I mean, we're assuming his age is Jude's age. So if he's around about 50 as a character, which is what Jude is, give or take, and this is where are we now? Let's say 10 years after Jedi, so 15 years after Star Wars, so 35 years after Revenge of the Sith, so 45 years after, nearly 50 years after Phantom Menace. So he would have been a Padawan at that time. He could have been one of the younglings in the temple when Qui-Gon was teaching. So it does all match up.
Exactly, it all lines up. We have these little mysteries that don't necessarily draw attention to themselves dramatically.
We've had flashback moments in Mando. We've had flashback moments in different shows, in Ahsoka, back to the temple. We went back to the temple in other shows. I'm just thinking maybe there's an opportunity here when it unravels and we start to learn what Jod's real deal is. Because like you say, there's more than just a force sensitivity. There's a force talent here. He can physically do things, but he can't do Jedi mind tricks. I mean, he would have totally tried that on anyone and everyone if he could. So he's got certain talents, no moral compass, as we find out. But I just wonder if there's going to be a sequence when you do go back to the temple and do see a young Jod training under whoever. I mean, goodness knows technology now is adept enough to show whatever it wants.
You could even imagine like a slightly de-aged Liam Neeson coming back,
Oh, totally. And what a moment that would be. What a moment that would be.
Yeah, that would be cool.
In this show of all shows.
Exactly. Because we don't really have much touchstones directly to the Old Republic. Ironically, yet we have a massive touchstone to the Old Republic in what ends up being At-Atin. Although, actually, I suppose it depends how they do it. Flashbacks become quite an easy way of showing exposition, but sometimes I find they're a little bit of a clunky way of showing exposition. And if you rely on them too much, sometimes there could be more creative ways of doing it. But at the same time, that doesn't mean to say that wouldn't be open to that.
It's a device, but can be a bit of a lazy crutch to lean on sometimes. But I'm just thinking in Ahsoka when she's training, and you see Ahsoka training, you see the hologram of Anakin, and you learn from Huyang that he recorded X amount of these holograms for Ahsoka. And that as a practical, tactile in the room moment was kind of cool. And I'm just wondering, not that I didn't already, because this show's been so consistently good, but I've got the confidence in Watson 4 that they will have thought, let's do something a little out of the box.
Let's try and do something a little bit more clever. You can do a flashback, and if there's no other way of doing it, then you do it. But let's try and find a cleverer way of doing it anyway. So. Designs of the whole planet is kind of interesting because you have this very earthbound mud spa, slightly industrial a little bit, it's for massive big pipes and stuff running around. But also the security guards look like rebel honor guards from Yavin. But we then meet Pocket, the bounty hunter. Talk about a small galaxy has been screwed over by Jod once again. He seems to be quite renowned for doing that.
And another fake name as well.
Yes.
And her look was fantastic. They did a phenomenal job on the makeup with the hair and the bald head. And it was a little bit of Aura Singh vibes about it. Not that I'm saying it's the same species, but it kind of had that vibe.
Exactly. It had that very white, pale skin. And what I'm liking about this show is the fact that, we're almost getting slight variations on classical Star Wars alien species. They just plonk them in. Oh, here you go. I suppose, stars.com will probably, if they haven't already posted an article, I'm sure they will list her species and stuff like that.
I'll be Star Wars, they're going to do it somewhere. I like the fact that she used her own accent. I watched Force Awakens yesterday. I love watching Force Awakens. So I just fancy watching Force Awakens. And the scene on the Eravana when Guavian Death Gang and Cancer Club turn up and the fella's talking with the Scottish accent. And it's like, now that is an accent in the Star Wars galaxy and that's fine. Because he's not talking Scottish words, he's just talking with a Scottish accent in the same way Diego Luna speaks in his own voice. He's not saying things that are native to his original country. He's just saying Star Wars stuff in that accent. Cool, go for it. We've done it for years on Clone Wars with French-speaking Twi'leks. They're not saying, blah, 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 blah. They're speaking with that accent. Using the accent's fine because goodness knows we've had English and American accents since day one on Star Wars. So it all makes sense.
She was a bounty hunter, or at least she used to work for the guild, but now she's gone private. But obviously she's still got her fingers on the pulse because I'm guessing she's very much aware of bounty on Jod's neck anyway. So she then obviously reports back to
Captain Brutus.
Oh my God, names this morning. I've clearly eaten way too much chocolate. So that's when they jump in. I mean, I just like that whole way that the ship comes into a planet and you've got the security guards who are running through the regular spiel and they just get blown in exactly what's going.
Yeah.
What I like about this show, and I think this episode especially, is the fact that you have these kind of moments, and I think they do it intentionally, where they've really got a really good balance. When they split up to try and find the entrance to the lair, you've got Team Jedi 1 and then Team Jedi 2. The stuff with Jod is kind of a little bit more slapsticky, a little bit more kind of fun, but it doesn't feel completely out of place because then you go to something that's a little bit more serious. They've got this really nice ebb and flow of humour and pacing and stuff,
This has found that balance between serious moments, when Jod sits down with Wim and Wim's missing his dad and we kind of now learn, I'm missing my mum and dad, but my mum ain't coming back. So we can now start to say, well, she's either left or she's died. It's one or the other, which was kind of always the case. So you go from that sad little scene where Jod's showing a smidgen of empathy to the chase scene where thankfully KB was sharp enough. You see her looking at all the nuts and bolts on the different pipes and she's figuring it out. Is that
the first time we've actually seen a proper AJ, a proper adjustable spanner? Like,
I'm sure R2's got one in there somewhere.
He probably has. The other thing, random as hell, I'm pretty sure that Wim's trainers is the first time that we've actually seen intentional Velcro used on footwear in Star Wars.
Okay.
Because he had very much kind of like the typical kind of Velcro trainers or sneakers.
As long as there's no zips. I mean, let's honour Ralph on Christmas Day. As long as there's no zips, everything's gravy. It's all good.
Exactly. It's all Christmas gravy.
For everything in one location, Daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds. Bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Well, actually, one thing where I found quite interesting about, let's call it Skull Ridge Mountain, because I think it's a much better name for the spa than anything else, was that you had the banking clan there.
Yes.
And the huts. So not only is it called that we've got the banking clan as a nod back to the prequels, but also you've got the huts, because surely that's not by accident that you'd have a load of huts and the banking clan turn up for a conference on this planet at the same time, right?
Here's a thought for you. 1 week after they announced Jeremy Allen White is playing Rotter the Hutt, and we see a Hutt quite casually pick up one of the help and presumably put him in his mouth. Could that be Rotter the Hutt? I know there's numerous millions of Hutts slugging their way around the galaxy, but wouldn't it be funny if that was Rotter?
Would be cool.
We had places like this in the old Marvel run, opulent places like that. In the Han Solo books, there was sort of cool places like this, the Free Flight Dance Dome and all that sort of cool locations that people would go for entertainment. And this is a pleasure planet. But I definitely got Canto Bight vibes from this. I'd love to know where in the galaxy this is, because you'd expect something like this in the corporate sector, because it's that out of the way, left to their own devices to a degree sort of place. I don't think this is there. I'd love to know where this is all happening in the galaxy location-wise. I'm hoping that's something that we find out at some point.
Jumping ahead a little bit, but when we do actually get to the AT-ATin coordinates about, I was like, I wonder, I'm not particularly great with galactic geography as yourself, but I was like, I wonder if that map gave you a clear indication, like...
Yeah, a good eye and a closer look would probably give some details away there. It'd probably take a bit of research. You know, we've got the hounds on it here at Fantha. I'm sure there's other people out there doing that right now as we speak.
So when we find the whole pirate lair and we go underneath the spa and stuff, that's when I think it hit not only hardcore Goonies vibes, but also Last Crusade vibes.
Totally Indiana Jones sequence there. Don't touch anything, which they do by mistake, which is the Temple of Doom nod. But also, as you say, when you get into that room and you feel that Jod's natural instinct will be a bit more like Mac in Crystal Skull, grab everything. Yeah. And he's like, don't touch anything. Everything's a booby trap. Assume it's, or even the most innocuous stuff. And there was that lovely little fake moment where Wim spots the lightsaber. And you're thinking, is that it? And then it's Neil that spots that the meat is fresh, but everything else is rotted. That was a really good spot.
But even then, you still got that hurdle you've got to get over, and you can't just kind of go and just sit on a chair and grab it. You've got to be a little bit more clever with it. I mean, the whole booby trap thing, to me, I mean, some of it did look like it just comes fresh out of TK Maxx, really. Some of those gold statues just looked it's like they should be on sale in January. But also, for me, when he said about it being booby trapped, I immediately went to like the Gringotts vault in Harry Potter. You touch your cup and then suddenly everything starts multiplying. So it was actually kind of nice that they didn't go with the big set piece stunt, and actually they used that area to really give us a big twist as to like Jod's whole character makeup. We get SM-33 puts his little probe in the hole and calls up the coordinates, and then we get the reveal that AT-ATin is the last remaining Republic mint. Did we think that there's something going on with AT-ATin about this? Because you know, that money did always look really fresh
and shiny. Yeah, I think we might have alluded to it. I don't know whether we went into detail. The shininess of the coins was always very noticeable.
Yeah,
you've always got the kids going, "What's a brig? Well, what's this? What's that?" Wim doesn't know. What's a mint? You know, they don't really know a lot of things. I mean, okay, you can attribute it Wim a little bit because I think Wim for whimsical. You know, he's kind of looking out the window a lot. He's having his little daydreams. That kind of works, but there's things that they don't get told. And so that reveal was interesting. And as you say, you saw that sequence earlier when they take all the weapons from them. And I kind of assume nobody else really saw it, just him, when he uses the Force to get the knife and tucks it in his belt. And then you get to that sequence when they've gone through all the booby traps, they've figured out the acid and all that stuff. And Brutus's people are chasing, and presumably from what Jod does later, when he's now got control, he's challenged Fern and gone through that whole little scene of the kids like, oh no, you know, he's turned on us. He's as bad as everybody's been telling us. They were warned. And
even that big walrus crossed hut thing kind of like knows who he is.
How many names now? I mean, we must be at 5 names now, you know, because they're referring to him as Captain Silver, and which is, you know, as we know from the first episode, and kids know him as Jod, and the pirate called him, what was it? I can't think, was it Batrick or something like that? She had a name for him. Crimson Jack. There's half a dozen names right there. So he says it to Wim, forget the past, forget your fears, forget your family. Your focus determines your reality. He's proper Qui-Gon Jinning this. He's living to the letter of what Qui-Gon said without any of the subtleties. That's how it feels in this moment anyway. So now he's caught in a box and he's been very linear about it. What can I do? Oh, I need to get SM33 on side, so I'm going to challenge the captain. Kid's got no chance against him. He's a pirate. He can clearly handle himself.
Like an adult.
Plucky kid, but ultimately she's a kid. It was a great twist at the end. Not a twist. I mean, it's not like I fell out of my seat, but
I mean, that's the thing. Like, you kind of saw one side of him last week. I guess basically, like, the moral compass or his through line is that ultimately he wants the treasure. You know, he's not even really fussed about the reward. He's more fussed about making more than he's ever going to be given. And so therefore it's just a means to an end, because go get the kids, because the kids control SM33. It's a fairly kind of logical expectation, but you also are left to believe at the end of each episode, oh, he's a good guy, or he is actually looking out for the kids. Now he's not, and maybe this is his true colours coming through.
And I think back to Solo throwbacks in the geography of Lanupa anyway, just the way it's set up with the mountains and stuff. But I just think of Beckett all the way through to Solo as basically, don't trust me. Listen and learn, but don't trust me. And then at the end, he turns on Han and he's like, I did say don't trust me. You know, there's that in there. Well, Han Solo at that point is in his probably late teens, early 20s by that point. But these are kids. So they're a lot more analog. The kids are like, oh, he's told us he's a good guy, so he's a good guy. Fern's the suspicious one. KB's watching stuff. She still hasn't had her big moment. It's coming. I can feel it. It's coming.
It's, you know? Exactly. Yeah.
And the boys are a lot more sort of, I think they're all playing on a level playing field and they're not.
The boys are definitely the most naive, because I think last week's episode really set this episode up, because last week really got Fern on side with Jod to trust him. So then obviously now when he's got his knife against her neck and that, probably going to be an even bigger betrayal to her. And I think that she's probably going to take a lot more to get over that, I think, you know. And
he's played a clever long game in the sense that when he realised that she's the captain and SM33 will follow the captain, and they did what they did to sort of unlock SM33, so he's now not the threat that he was at the end of last week's episode.
Yes.
That's just, you can see the wheels turning for Jod. It's like, oh, I've got an opportunity here now.
Exactly.
You know, because SM33 clearly knows all about Captain Renard, all about Battle World and Demon's Rest and all these places that they call Lanupa. And so he has knowledge unlocked, available to Jod, that he can now use to his advantage. So I think at this point, I don't think Jod's, I mean, he was like, take them captive for, you know, what was it? Sedition against the captain or whatever the phrase was, something like that.
Was it a mutiny or something? Or...
I think it was, You know, and even SM30 was like, sorry, kids, got to do this. It's a great moment right at the end, literally the last thing, Wim just hitting the chair and them all just disappearing.
But before that, the best like laugh out loud moment I've had in this whole show was when picks up a lightsaber and we're kind of like, oh, here we go. Here's Wim's like hero of the week moment, like Neil had last week, and he ignites it and it's upside down. It's like
it was Wim's Finn moment, but it nearly ended up being Wim's Porg moment when the Porg's jumping up and down on a lightsaber, and you're thinking, oh, go on, just show it.
Just do it. The thing is, I mean, he was holding it, and I was like, hang on a sec, that was so funny. And in such a good way, because then also the other thing is it's a clean getaway for them. Otherwise, what's going to happen is Jod's going to kind of force grab the lightsaber, and then you're going to probably have a really awkward situation. So at least from a nice, clean, simplistic out to the episode, it worked really well. We're
wondering about KB and her history and whether or not she's got some sort of latent abilities, because she's quite switched on. Now we know she's got all the tech on her. She was concerned about going into the spa. I think it's Jod that says why, because it'll mess up your systems. And I think there's more to it than that. But she's always the one, like at the beginning when SM33's been turned on and Jod's like, oh, I ain't doing it. You know, and Fern's nervous, and then Fern just turns to KB and goes, KB, switch him on. She's the one that always gets told to do stuff. And she says, essentially, in not so many words, can I not go into the steamy spa? And she ends up being sent into the spa. So there is still that element of, because she's got the cybernetics on her. And again, that feels like a throwback to Book of Boba Fett as well. And the way that Lobot's treated and has been in the comics and everything. Because she's got the cybernetic enhancements, she's almost become, to a degree, a second-class citizen as well. Not to the degree that SM33 is, but there's the pecking order and she's not at the top of it.
Exactly. Let's see what happens with that. Because, look, I think you're right. I don't think we have had all that we're going to see from KB. I think maybe she's put a back door into SM33 when she kind of reprogrammed him and some of those safety things. I wonder if she's done something like that. And just hasn't kind of said anything to anybody just in case. But that we'll find out in next week's episode. So, Mr. Newbold, thank you very much for joining me. It's been good fun as always.
Always is.
Drop us an email or a WhatsApp or a Instagram message, DM, whatever it is. I'm Mark_base81, and obviously Miss Newbold is prefect_timing. So drop us messages, especially if you've got comments or queries or stuff that we've missed out, because, you know, let's be fair, it's first thing in the morning and we probably missed a ton of stuff. So could you just let everybody know how they can get in touch?
I certainly can, and here's how you can do it.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's me done for this episode, and I think probably, finally, for the year.
I reckon that's us done for 2024. Everybody, thank you very much for listening and supporting the podcast and Fantha Tracks over this year, and look forward to more exciting stuff from the team in 2025. Until then, have a fantastic Christmas, whatever you're celebrating, and as always, stay safe, take care, and may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.
The show's called Skeleton Crew, by the way.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and this is Reaction Chat. Hey, hello. No, we don't know that.
It's not, it's Reaction Crew. Come on.
Okay.